Last year, I published a video detailing AMD's many product launch failures, from stuffing up the prices of their RDNA 3 graphics cards, ensuring poor reviews, to overhyping product performance through inaccurate and misleading benchmarks, to launching key graphics features in a broken and embarrassing state. There was a consistent pattern of AMD making simple blunders and shooting themselves in the foot. Today, I'm checking in to see whether AMD has learnt their lesson. Over the last few months, with the launch of new RDNA 4 graphics cards, has AMD actually taken this feedback on board and improved the way they handle launches and marketing? At Hardware Unboxed, we always revisit things and update you on when products have improved. That's no different when we criticize the companies themselves, so this video serves as a follow-up to the one that we published last year.
Today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Be Quiet and their brand new range of light-based 600 and 900 series cases. The light-based 600 is available with 4 Lightwings LX 120mm PWM fans, 3 of which are reversed so they look the same throughout the case, while the more affordable DX model forgoes the pre-installed fans for those of you that like to bring your own. Both models feature a huge LED light bar that spans the front and top, featuring over 1.2 meters of ARGB LEDs, and you'll also find glass panels at the front and side for a stunning panoramic view of all your PC components. What we love most about the light base though is the ability to orient the case multiple different ways using relocatable feet. You can invert the case in literally seconds. There's also room for 2 360mm radiators, full-size GPUs with vertical mounting options, and loads more. So for a full rundown of what the light-based 600 and 900 series has to offer, please check the links in the video description.
In my original video, I identified 12 key failures surrounding AMD's product launches, and I'm going to revisit each one, starting with mistake number 1, setting too high a launch price. One of the main failings with the RDNA 3 generation was absurd pricing for several key products in the lineup. The Radeon RX 7900 XT was the headlining product in this discussion. At $900 US, this GPU never made sense. Its hardware was cut down by at least 15% relative to the flagship RX 7900 XTX, leading to 17% slower gaming performance in our benchmarks. But AMD priced this model just 10% under the XTX, making it essentially dead on arrival as a poor value model no one should purchase. Other models in the lineup were also poorly priced, such as the RX 7700 XT, a graphics card that was 10% cheaper than the RX 7800 XT, but 17% slower. The RX 7600 debuted at $270 US, a price point that offered no real improvement over previous generation offerings at the time, and even the flagship model, the 7900 XTX, was underwhelming at $1,000 after AMD's initial performance claims turned out to be exaggerated. With RDNA 4, AMD has put themselves in a much better position, launching the RX 9070 XT at $600 US. And while that card is difficult to actually purchase at that price, it actually makes sense in the GPU market compared to Nvidia's offerings, something you couldn't say about the 7900 XT. AMD has also had success with the RX 9060 XT 16GB model, priced at $350 US, which again is a highly competitive position up against Nvidia's RTX 5060 series. Neither of these models will have to receive embarrassing price cuts just months after launch due to pricing failures, so from that perspective, AMD has definitely learned and improved. It's not a complete improvement though. AMD have still struggled to price the entire lineup appropriately. The main product of contention here is probably the RX 9070, which is 12% slower than the RX 9070 XT for just an 8% discount comparing MSRPs, making it worse value in cost per frame. But it's also not a disaster on the scale of the 7900 XT. The 9070 should probably be, say, $50 cheaper, but the 7900 XT needed to be at least $150 cheaper. There's also the issue of the 8GB RX 9060 XT, a product that we strongly believe should not exist, or at least not exist at its $300 US price point. But what we're talking about with this model is a bit different to previous RDNA 3 discussions. This isn't so much a mismatch between hardware configuration and price when comparing those things to a higher tier model, but a product with fundamental flaws due to its 8GB of VRAM. You could say this product is poorly priced at launch and should be much cheaper, but it's also actually quite competitive with Nvidia's lineup when strictly looking at other 8GB models around the same price, in a way that, say, the RX 7600 wasn't. So I'm not giving AMD a complete pass here, but I'm also not giving them a fail. I think they have improved, but they still have further improvement to go. Mistake number 2, repeating the pricing mistake despite feedback. One of the heavy criticisms we had of AMD previously was around how they would repeat the same mistakes multiple times despite receiving strong feedback that their mistakes were indeed mistakes. I mentioned one of these in the previous segment. They priced the RX 7900 XT in a position that made no sense given its hardware, copped negative feedback. Then a few months later, they repeated the exact same mistake with the RX 7700 XT. So far, AMD have not really done this. The closest they've come to this type of issue is ignoring the pre-warnings that the 8GB model of the 9060 XT would be bad and either shouldn't exist or should have a dirt cheap price point. They proceeded with their plans anyway, but this, it wasn't really a repeat of a mistake they had already made and received feedback from in previous reviews. I think repeating the same mistakes is especially stupid, so avoiding that this time is a win and a sign that AMD has learned and improved. Mistake number 3. Launch decisions that cause negative reviews. This issue is closely related to the previous two issues around pricing. AMD's strategy with previous generation launches has been to stuff up the products to begin with, ensuring reviews are negative and ensuring a lack of interest in their products. They've tried to eke out a few extra dollars from products like the RX 7900 XT, but ultimately this has led to lackluster sales as consumers and the media have rejected those prices from the start. There has been a clear shift in strategy with RDNA 4 to ensure products have launched in a state that would lead to positive reviews. The 9070 XT was priced at a position that meant reviewers didn't immediately dismiss it as dead on arrival. In fact, the complete opposite happened. Most reviewers praised it. Now, there was some behind-the-scenes haggling around the final price. There's been difficulties achieving that price, and AMD have to some degree been playing Nvidia's game, something we'd rather not see. But there is no doubt this strategy has been much more successful than the old strategy, and this applies to other models like the RX 9060 XT 16GB as well. Nailing those first impressions is key, and AMD have improved their launches to better set up their products for success. Again, the only time this might not apply is probably the 8GB 9060 XT, which did launch to negative feedback, and this could have been avoided through a range of different strategies: lowering the price, changing the name, launching it at a different time, or just not launching it at all. So I wouldn't say this issue has been fully resolved, but there have certainly been many steps in the right direction. Mistake number 4. Adjusting the product position soon after damage is done. When you make the previous 3 mistakes that we've been talking about, you're basically forced to make a 4th mistake, which is adjusting the product's price soon after the fact. Of course, lowering the price of a graphics card to a position where it actually sells is good, but the mistake here is doing so after the product launches instead of before. Having to drop the price of the RX 7900 XT by several $100s just months after launch is embarrassing, and by the time this happens, the damage is already done. People have already forgotten about the card because the initial impression was so bad. As Gamers Nexus pointed out earlier this year, this mistake has a secondary effect. It means customers have less confidence in the original launch price. If they know AMD just lowers prices a few months after launch, they won't buy at the launch price. They'll wait for the price to come down, and this leads to lower profit for AMD and the chance a competitor will swoop in and steal the sale. Establishing an attractive price from the start gets sales right away, and if that price is maintained, which is exactly what Nvidia does, customers know they can't just wait for a better deal. If anything, you'll have to buy as soon as the card launches for the best deal, and that's previously what AMD has failed to provide. So far, AMD hasn't needed to adjust the position of their products because no damage has been done and sales have been strong. Again, maybe outside of that 8GB 9060 XT. So we can tick this one off as an improvement from Team Red. Mistake number 5, last minute changes. This issue specifically relates to the RX 7600 in the previous generation, although that hasn't been the only time AMD has made very last minute changes to a GPU. Essentially what happened with the 7600 is reviewers received this card with the knowledge that it would be priced at $300 US, and then right before those reviews were set to be published, they changed the price to $270 and did a poor job of communicating this. Some people weren't told of the change at all, so published a review based on an incorrect and less attractive price. Others, like us, had 90% completed a review based on the original price and had to scramble to update it for the new price, which ultimately made little difference to the quality of the product. It was still bad. Setting a correct price before launch is good, and changing the price to a better price before launch is also good, but those changes should happen well before the launch, not 24 hours out. You want the launch to go smoothly, not to be plagued with potential miscommunications and issues. Based on what we've heard, there were certainly some last-minute discussions and changes regarding the 9070 XT's price, but crucially, this all happened before the product was announced, and so it didn't impact anything. No miscommunication to the media, no reviews or news published with the wrong price. It was a smooth launch where everyone had plenty of time to digest the information. Across RDNA 4 so far, it seems AMD has learned their lesson with this one, and there's been no last-minute changes. Mistake number 6. Overestimating and overhyping product performance. AMD made this mistake several times across the Zen 5 and RDNA 3 launches. When announcing the RX 7900 XTX, they claimed the part was up to 1.7 times faster than the RX 6950 XT while gaming at 4K, and 55% faster on average. However, in our benchmarking, we found the card was just 35% faster than its predecessor, which made it look considerably less attractive at its $1,000 price point. AMD had overestimated the performance of the 7900 XTX. They excused this by saying our 6950 XT was too fast, and this led to serious overhype. AMD repeated this mistake with Zen 5, claiming the Ryzen 7 9700X would be 13% faster than the Intel Core i7-14700K in games on average, when in our day one testing we found the Intel part was 6% ahead on average. AMD also claimed the 9700X would be a couple of percentage points faster than the 7800X 3D, which also turned out to be false. Like with the 7900 XTX, this led to lackluster, underwhelming reviews because Zen 5's actual performance didn't meet the claims. Across the RDNA 4 launch so far, AMD has been much more accurate with the data they've presented to everyone, which has stopped an overhype then underwhelm situation from playing out. In the RX 9070 XT launch video, AMD claimed the 9070 XT was 2% slower than the RTX 5070 Ti on average at 4K gaming. In our day one review, we found it was 1% slower at 4K, a much more accurate situation than the 7900 XTX's launch. AMD also claimed that the RX 9060 XT offered similar performance to the RTX 5060 Ti, and that turned out to be largely true as well, based on our independent testing. Clearly, this is an area that AMD have worked on, and helping the situation is the fact the products they've been having to advertise are simply better, so the real results can largely speak for themselves. Either way, not a mistake they've made this generation. Mistake number 7, the inability to benchmark products internally. One of the main problems that caused the overestimation of product performance in advertising slides was AMD's inability to properly benchmark their own products. Across the Zen 5 data, there were some really strange results they presented to media in the review guide, numbers that didn't make sense, testing configurations that didn't make sense, and a heavy reliance on poor quality canned benchmarks. This led to Zen 5 gaming data that was wrong and painted an incorrect picture of its position relative to Intel and older Zen products. This hasn't been an issue with the RDNA 4 launch in 2025 because AMD have moved to using a large number of games in their marketing materials, they are testing more relevant and more recent games, and they've made a concerted effort to improve the accuracy of their data. So that's really good to see. Mistake number 8, deliberately misleading benchmarks that get exposed. This mistake specifically related to AMD's advertising of the Ryzen 7 5800 XT and Ryzen 9 5900 XT, where they benchmarked these CPUs using an entry-level Radeon RX 6600 graphics card, bottlenecking the system and creating GPU-limited results. There also appeared to be testing errors, leading to laughable results like the 5800 XT being 12% faster than the 13600 KF in Cyberpunk 2077. We showed the Core i5 part was actually about 33% faster on average when testing properly without a strong GPU limit. This sort of mistake is different to just poorly benchmarking products and overestimating performance because this mistake appeared to be a deliberate misconfiguration of a benchmark system to make the product look better than it really is. Other misleading benchmarks, things like the 7900 XTX and Zen 5, seemed more down to benchmarking incompetence and accidental errors. We don't like to see deliberate efforts to exaggerate performance either, and if anything, this is a worse mistake to make because when it's exposed, it hurts your reputation. Across AMD's 2025 launches, we have not seen this mistake repeated, and the benchmark data we've been provided has been accurate with no deliberately bad test configurations, so let's hope that continues. Mistake number 9, announcing new features too early. In the RDNA 3 generation, AMD announced FSR 3 way too early. In response to Nvidia's DLSS frame generation that launched with GeForce 40 series cards, AMD announced FSR 3 alongside RDNA 3 in November of 2022, but it wouldn't be released until 11 months later, after a ton of frustration about why it was taking so long, and after buyers had purchased RDNA 3 GPUs expecting to use the feature sooner than that. As things stand right now, we don't appear to be in a position where AMD have announced a new feature way too early. The initial RDNA 4 reveal with the 9070 XT focused almost entirely on features that would be available day one, like FSR4, better video encoding, and new stuff added to Radeon software. No promising of something, only to not deliver that anytime soon. There is still a bit of a question mark around FSR Redstone, which is an upcoming suite of technologies that includes neural radiance caching, AI-based ray regeneration, and AI-based frame generation. This was announced alongside the RX 9060 XT with an expected release date in the second half of 2025. So long as AMD actually hit that target launch window, this would not be a situation of AMD announcing a feature far too early, so for now things have been going well in this area. Mistake number 10, launching new features in poor games. When releasing brand new graphics features that are the cornerstone of your GPU software offering, you want those features to be in high quality games people own and are interested in playing. AMD failed to do this with FSR3, launching that feature in an embarrassing fashion. It slid out with very little fanfare in two poorly received titles that few people wanted to play, Immortals of Avium and Forspoken. In contrast, Nvidia were able to get their new tech in major flagship titles like Cyberpunk 2077. Launching in poor or irrelevant games hurt AMD's brand perception, and that's why it was a mistake to debut FSR3 in the games they did. Nvidia tries very hard to maintain their image as a leader in gaming, and they do this by ensuring major titles support RTX features. Back with RDNA 3 and FSR3, AMD needed to do the same. This is another area where AMD have made significant improvements. FSR4, through their driver upgrade feature, launched day one in dozens of titles, including major games people actually owned and liked to play. This included Horizon Forbidden West, The Last of Us Parts 1 and 2, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and more. And on top of that, they've kept up a much better pace of adding FSR4 support to new titles. This year, it's come to 2025 releases like Stellar Blade, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Oblivion Remastered, Assassin's Creed Shadows, just to name a few. When gamers buy a GPU, they want to know key features like FSR4 will be supported across a broad range of games when they play them. So far, AMD have done a much better job of delivering this than they have with previous iterations of their graphics features. Mistake number 11, launching new features with major issues. The other mistake AMD made with FSR3's launch was releasing it in a broken state. The implementation in the two launch titles had frame pacing issues in a variety of configurations, which really let the feature down. This meant the first taste gamers got of FSR3 after nearly a year of waiting, if they even owned the two supported titles, was something substandard and not fully functional. The launch of FSR4 couldn't have been any different. FSR4 worked flawlessly from the start, it delivered great image quality and great performance. Anyone buying a new RDNA 4 graphics card would have gotten a great experience in the first FSR4 title they tried. First impressions are so important, especially for gamers that might have come from an Nvidia GPU that supported DLSS, which works really well. Safe to say, this mistake has been fixed. Mistake number 12, breaking games with new features. The final mistake to discuss revolves around AMD's Anti-Lag Plus feature, which broke games. Essentially, this was a version of NVIDIA Reflex, except instead of being integrated into the games themselves, AMD injected Anti-Lag Plus into games via the driver. This triggered anti-cheat detection in major multiplayer titles like Counter-Strike 2 and Apex Legends, titles where you'd want to use anti-lag, causing some users to get banned. After this embarrassing mistake, AMD pulled the feature, eventually the banned gamers were unbanned, and Anti-Lag Plus re-emerged as Anti-Lag 2, requiring game integration. This sort of entirely avoidable error hasn't occurred with the launch of RDNA 4's features, so it seems like they're actually avoiding these errors now. While FSR4 doesn't require game integration itself, it relies on existing FSR 3.1 integrations, and the driver upgrade feature is not breaking games as far as I'm aware. AMD also are maintaining a whitelist of supported titles and are updating this list when games are proven to work, which is the best approach. So this is another area where it's safe to say AMD have improved significantly. Across the 12 mistakes that I've revisited here, AMD have avoided making these same mistakes again in 2025 in the vast majority of instances. AMD have significantly improved their benchmarking process, creating marketing materials that are more accurate and don't overhype their products to unnecessary degrees. They've been much more successful at launching new graphics card features like FSR4. It launched in a decent number of popular games in a functional, high-quality state from the beginning. They've also avoided some mistakes that previously led to negative reviews, like changing prices at the last minute and repeating pricing errors multiple times. In my opinion, this shows AMD have taken some genuine steps towards improving the way they launch and market products. This has been a big problem with the Radeon division for some time now, and with RDNA 4 launches, there have been far fewer silly blunders to criticize. Not everything is perfect though. The RX 9070 has been a repeat of previous pricing mistakes to some degree, though it's probably not as bad as what we saw previously. And we've heavily criticized pretty much everything relating to the RX 9060 XT 8GB. But on the whole, I think a lot of what I said in my previous video doesn't apply to AMD's 2025 product launches. So far, they've reversed a trend of botching these launches, and I hope that continues for the foreseeable future. So anyway, that's it for this revisit of AMD's launches and whether or not they've been botching them or not. If you do appreciate the independent analysis and testing that we do here at Hardware Unboxed, please consider supporting us via our Patreon page. Links to that is in the description below. If you sign up, you get access to some pretty cool benefits. We've got BTS videos, monthly live streams, a Discord chat, which is a great place to chat about tech, and plenty more. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.